Welcome back, everybody. It's a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast on Fantasy Pros. We are going to have a great time here. It's Scott Bogman, joined, as always, by Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF and Andrew Erickson at Andrew Erickson_ on the Twitter machine. Fitz, little computer difficulty, not in the greatest of moods, but we're ready to talk about a little free agency movement, right?
My mood is brightening already just being here with you guys. But yeah, there were some problems. Hopefully it's all under control. And, if it's not under control, then you don't get my witticisms. And that's probably for the better for everyone. So
no, you look and sound absolutely great. Erickson, it's been a little bit since we've talked, but you had a good time in Dallas with everybody for Fantasy Pros, and a lot of free agency movement, a lot of mock drafts going on right now. So you ready to talk some Dynasty today?
Oh, anytime I get to hop off the flagship pod and hit the streets of the Dynasty pod, I'm always like, here we go. Here's time to let loose. We don't have it. Doesn't need to be as official. So I'm ready to let loose here, boys.
That's right. So we are going to rock and roll. We're going to go through the quarterback movements, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. We'll go by position here, make it easy for everyone. And we'll run through all of the movements, talk about some Dynasty impact on these players as well. But before we get rolling, I got to tell you guys, the winner of our 1-year fantasy premium subscription giveaway is Marcel Griffin. Please get in touch with our customer support agents at mailbag@fantasypros.com with proof of your subscription to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and current fantasypros.com username, and we will get that upgrade process for you as soon as possible. Again, Marcel Griffin is our winner. Congratulations. And if you didn't know, we're going to run this back. Subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel and comment below on this video, because when you do, you could win a free FREE upgrade to Fantasy Pros Premium. Whether you're looking for custom mock drafts, salary cap draft tools, or in-depth analysis of your fantasy performance, Fantasy Pros Premium has the tools to help you win. Unlock the most powerful tools in the industry. Don't want to wait for the giveaway? Sign up today at fantasypros.com/premium and start playing smarter, not harder. All right, gentlemen, let's dive right into this QB movement that we've had. So I'm going to run through the movements, and then, Pat, I want you to tell me who the biggest mover in Dynasty is for you, and how many of these landing spots do you like? How many are lateral, and what do you think about them? So right now, we're still in a holding pattern on Lamar. Very confusing situation here, especially Atlanta saying they're not in when they have all the cap room and a real big need for a quarterback, but okay. So we're thinking Lamar's going to end up back in Baltimore at this point. Aaron Rodgers to the Jets isn't official, but it looks like that's going to happen. Derek Carr going to New Orleans, Jimmy G to Vegas, Andy Dalton to Carolina, probably starting initially, depending on who they draft. Baker Mayfield to Tampa Bay to compete with Kyle Trask. Jacoby Brissett to compete with Sam Howell in Washington. So, Fitzy, when you look at these QB movements, which ones stand out to you the most? Which ones have the biggest positive impact for fantasy in Dynasty?
Well, I mean, I think Lamar is probably the headliner here just because still young and I think a lot of the Lamar investors are probably a little freaked out that this is still unresolved. So maybe, whereas in a super flex Dynasty league, he was untouchable before, maybe now not so untouchable. So that's the most impactful situation, I think. I kind of like that it feels like a new lease on life for Derek Carr, who's still only, 31 years old. And yet I think I've seen like some fantasy Dynasty rankings that have Aaron Rodgers valued higher than Derek Carr. And to me, we're looking at maybe a 2-year window max for Aaron Rodgers, and maybe the window's a little bit more for Derek Carr. Not that he's ever been anything more than a quarterback 2, but a guy who would certainly still contribute and be a quarterback 2 in super flex leagues. So, not a lot of headliner type movement. I still think the rookies are going to be more impactful for Dynasty than this free agent group. But some interesting situations. And Jimmy Garoppolo, his relevancy prolonged a little bit. But a lot of these other guys kind of now afterthoughts and backups.
Yeah, a lot of lateral moves, Baker going to Tampa Bay. I mean, really what it does is put a damper on Kyle Trask. Same thing for Jacoby Brissett going to Washington, kind of, rains on Sam Howell's parade a little bit. But the other ones, Jimmy G to Vegas, a little tick down, right? Because San Francisco has all those weapons. Andy Dalton to Carolina, we know they're drafting somebody. Derek Carr to New Orleans, yeah, all right, kind of lateral. Rodgers to the Jets is interesting, but he is old. Erickson, your thoughts on this QB movement, and is there anyone that stands out to you from these moves?
I think for me, it's probably Derek Carr as well. Just kind of looking at, if we're talking about this next year, at the beginning of the 2024 season, which of these quarterbacks is still starting for one of these teams or is like penciled in as a starter? And just based on the money that they gave him, based on, Derek Carr will probably, like Fitz said, he'll probably be a QB2. I don't think that he's going to just be horrible in New Orleans. New Orleans has some nice pieces. They have some good weapons there on the offense. And again, it's hard to like label him as this massive winner because he obviously came from a place where he had Devontae Adams. Like he had like a good receiver there. He had Josh Jacobs. And yet that team got rid of him. But that could have been more of a systematic where, he was chucking the ball like aggressively downfield in McDaniel's offense last year, and that really didn't work out for him. Like a lot of it was like Devontae Adams making the plays on passes that Derek Carr would throw downfield aggressively, but he really didn't have a lot of underneath options because Renfro got hurt, Waller got hurt, and Mac Hollins was not a guy that was really running routes where he could, from the slot, slants, and things like that. So I think Derek Carr, for me, just based on the contract, like he probably has the most standalone value, just not this year, but next year as well, which is something you obviously want to consider in Dynasty, is my QB2 slot just getting starts? Like that matters so much, like that you're just plugging someone in there versus, I have to start more receivers this week or another running back because I only have one quarterback that's actually starting a game. I feel pretty good about Derek Carr being the starter, not just this year for the Saints, but next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, one quarterback leagues, you only care where Aaron Rodgers and Lamar ends up. And then you're like, where are my backups? Okay, can they start there? Fine. Superflex, yeah, now you're paying a lot of attention to these moves. We had a lot of backups signed as well, guys. I mean, Taylor Heineke going to Atlanta to compete with Desmond Ridder. Not the best scenario in terms of statistics, most likely, but good spot for him to land because he could have another shot. Gardner Minshew ends up in Indianapolis. Most likely they're going to be drafting someone, or apparently rumors recently, maybe they'll pay for Lamar, but they'll be drafting someone at least. Sam Darnold ends up in San Francisco, tells us a little bit about the health of Brock Purdy. Probably not fantastic, or he's probably not going to be ready for the start of the season. PJ Walker ends up in Chicago. Mike White moves down to Miami. Jarrett Stidham to Denver. Kyle Allen to Buffalo, and Case Keenum to Houston. Fitz, any of the backup deals, I don't know, raise your eyebrow at all? Like, maybe I'll, take a shot on Taylor Heineke because I don't believe in Desmond Ridder, or Gardner Minshew keeps getting put in a situation where he could get a shot, and that's America's quarterback for whatever reason because he's a lefty from ECU. I don't know why, but everyone loves Gardner Minshew. So anything, raise your eyebrow here on the backup deals?
I don't believe in Desmond Ridder, but I don't believe in Taylor Heineke either. And we know they're going to be crazy run heavy with Arthur Smith calling the plays. Jarrett Stidham is kind of interesting because if this is really Russ being cooked, maybe Stidham ends up making some starts for the Broncos. So that's a little interesting to me. I think Stidham is rosterable, certainly in super flex leagues. And so is Darnold. I mean, you said it, Boggs. Like, they can't be feeling entirely confident about Brock Purdy's elbow to have made this signing. And, they also have Trey Lance, who is sort of the, the mystery box quarterback for them right now. I still want to be a Trey Lance believer. And I know he is like quarterback 15, quarterback 16 in most people's dynasty rankings, but like, we honestly still don't know if the guy can play. Like, I think so. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I mean, well, Erickson wants to say something.
It's a good time to buy, though.
I think so too. I mean, I'm more optimistic than most, but the fact is we haven't seen him consistently deliver yet. Although I think it's going to happen, and I think we're going to get like Konami code value from him as a runner. I want to let Erickson talk about this. He's dying to say something.
Yeah, Erickson. I mean, look, I love Trey Lance at this point because how good does the guy even have to be with all these weapons around him? Brock Purdy, the last pick in the draft, who is obviously much better than being Mr. Irrelevant. He showed that last year. But I mean, how much better is he than Andy Dalton, right? Like, he just had all these weapons around him, and Trey Lance is a weapon. So I'm excited to see Trey Lance in San Francisco. What about you?
Will we see Trey Lance in San Francisco? I don't know. I'm still so skeptical of, even more so than, I mean, imagine if fantasy scoring wasn't broken because of rushing. Like, we would care so much less about Trey Lance. Be like, this guy's literally never played. Like, why do we care about this guy? And obviously the rules are in place the way they are, so he does matter and he has to be in the conversation. But
don't do ifs and buts, Erickson. We wouldn't care about Lamar either.
I got Trey Lance fatigue at this point, trying to tout this guy when I'm like, dude, like this, like he has no experience like playing football. Like, and every time he tries to get experience, he's hurt. And that's the biggest thing. It's not like he's like the backup and he's getting reps. Like, he's not getting any reps at all.
And availability is the best ability, the old scouting trope, right? Like, you got to be on the field to contribute.
So for me, I mean, Sam Darnold is my like number one like buy low because he's gonna be 26 by the time the season starts, and Sam Darnold fits that Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo type of 49ers mold where it's like, if you just tell him what to do, he'll get it done. And especially in an off, like, this is the best situation he's ever been in as the backup on the 49ers. And again, it just would not surprise me at all if down the stretch we're talking about Sam Darnold starting games for this team. Just wouldn't surprise. You think, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that if he was a starting quarterback week 1, like, what would the 49ers odds to win the Super Bowl be? Like, it'd still be pretty high.
Unchanged, probably.
If Sam Darnold was the starter week 1, you think they would be unchanged?
I don't think they'd be.
Versus who? Wait, what is it based on now?
Lance.
Lance?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, it's based on hype, but I think they would. I think the odds would change. I mean, I think they go down a little bit just because we haven't seen Lance, so he's the mystery box, like Pat said, which always makes me think of the Family Guy. I want the box. What could be in it? Even a boat. But they were giving you a boat. Yeah. I mean, so like, we've seen Darnold though. We've seen Darnold fail twice. So I think that is why, the numbers would be adjusted, of course, not because Lance is good, but because he is the mystery and we've seen Darnold fail. But like I said, how good do you have to be as a quarterback for the Niners with all of you have CMC, you have Kittle, you have Debo, you have Ayuk, you have a great offensive line, you have a defense that's strong. Don't screw it up, Jimmy G. That's basically the story here. It's why Jimmy G is gone. He kept screwing it up. So, we'll see what happens with the quarterbacks. Any other quarterbacks you guys want to talk about? Anything that affects them from the moves that we have seen pre-draft here?
Let me make one more quick point about Aaron Rodgers. Like, I know every time a quarterback changes venues, I think there's maybe a little rekindled interest in him. I mean, we saw the yardage per game really drop off with Aaron Rodgers last year, and I'm not expecting a major rebound considering that, number one, he and Nathaniel Hackett were together in Green Bay from 2019 to 2021, and that was one of the slowest paced offenses, taking the most time between snaps of any team in the league. Number two, because the Jets defense is terrific. I mean, much better than the Packers defense was last year. There just aren't going to be many shootouts for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. So I think, like, whatever it was that Rodgers averaged per game last season, probably similar this season, I think.
Erickson, you feel the same way about Rodgers? Like, the move is somewhat lateral here in terms of fantasy?
I think so. I think that I don't think that he's going to be a QB1 unless he like puts up just like an absurd touchdown like ratio. Like, that would be it if he throws like 35 touchdowns. But like, I don't think we're going to see the absurd yardage totals from him from a team that wants to play good defense. And it's the Breece Hall show. Like, when Breece Hall is back, he's the guy. So yeah. I almost like that should get, and this segues great because we're going to talk about running backs here, but like, just don't forget about Breece Hall. Like, all this Jets, receivers, Garrett Wilson, they've traded Elijah Moore. Like, just draft Breece Hall. Like, that's like the number one thing with the Jets. Just don't forget about him.
Truth. You cannot forget about Breece Hall. He was outstanding last year. Before we go to running backs, let me tell you guys to stay on top of all the latest signings and trades with our Fantasy News and Scores app, the Fantasy Pros app, available on both the App Stores and Google Play. So check that out if you would. Let's go over to running backs. Let's first talk about a couple possible cuts. These are moves that haven't happened, but seem like they're going to. Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook, Pat, look like they're all but cut. Eckler has requested a trade. Those are huge pieces that are still yet to move. Do you think these moves get made here?
I think so. Everything seems to sort of point toward that. interesting. Like in one of my dynasty leagues where mostly sharp guys, I think there are some managers who aren't aware that Mixon is on the verge of being cut. So maybe this is a sell opportunity for Mixon, who, I don't know, to my eyes has not looked quite as explosive the last couple of years. And it might be just a good time to move on as Mixon sort of moves to the back nine of his career. And yeah, I mean, I think Cook, who is still very impactful when healthy, but you just wonder if he does land somewhere else, if he's going to get the same sized role that he's had in Minnesota.
Yeah, and Cook is the guy that definitely would have been gone, but he decided to have his surgery, which means he wouldn't pass his physical, which would have, if he got cut, it would have put, some type of salary kicker in his contract, so it made it not worth cutting him now. So until he can pass a physical, the Vikings won't cut him. They did re-sign Alexander Mattison, which was weird to me because they hadn't cut Cook yet. But Erickson, your thoughts on those guys in particular, Mixon, Cook, and Eckler?
Yeah, I think with Cook, I mean, there's another dime that's going to drop with the Vikings because, as I was kind of updating the team needs after free agency, there's only one team that's like in the negative still in terms of salary cap, and it's the Minnesota Vikings. So they're still a team that still has to figure stuff out, or else they can't sign their draft picks.
Darius Smith still on that team? That guy saved him like $11 million. Cut him.
So they still have a lot of things they have to work through. And Dalvin Cook's obviously been the name thrown around. Obviously, teams are going to try to trade running backs so they can get compensation before they end up cutting them because they have to save money because they paid them too much money in the first place. So I think it makes Madison somewhat of an interesting, target as a buy low because, the easy analysis to say, oh, well, they'll just draft someone. Well, when people say that, a lot of times they don't actually look and see like what draft picks the team actually has. Everyone just assumes, oh, they have a second-round pick, they have a third-round pick. The Vikings' next pick, they pick 23rd. They're not going to take a running back there unless they were to draft Bijan, so that's obviously in play. But then they don't draft till 87th. So that's a late day 3 or late round 3 pick. And I mean, if you're Madison, it's like, all right, well, Madison versus a guy taken to the end of round 3, like I think Madison. Like, has a fighter's chance against that type of running back there. So, and they like we talk about some of the guys that are still on the market. Madison got a contract before all those other guys did. So I know that it's easy to say like, oh well, he's been a backup, but he's been good in relief of Cook, and we haven't seen him obviously play as a starter full time. But the fact that the Vikings brought him back and are willing to move around from Dalvin at least shows me like, hey, if we got to roll with Madison as our starter, we'll do it. I mean, if something happens in the draft where we can get somebody better, okay, we will. But at this point in time, I don't think that everyone is still convinced that Madison can be the guy when I'm kind of trying to project things out forward. And it seems like, hey, like there's a chance that he is the guy at least next year.
Yeah, I was super excited to see where he landed because I just wanted to see him get a starter's role. Then he goes back to the Vikings, got paid a little less than I thought he was going to as well, and they haven't cut Cook yet. So I'm just waiting for that shoe to drop, and I think Madison is the guy like you do, Erickson. So I am excited for him this year. Let me group these three guys together, and you guys tell me for Dynasty and just how do you like the fit with these guys? Because it's just weird. It's going to be weird seeing them in different uniforms. First, we have Miles Sanders going to Carolina. Miles Sanders in a PPR league was 15th in total, 22nd in points per games among running backs last year. David Montgomery goes from Chicago to Detroit to pair with DeAndre Swift, 24th total, 28th in points per game last season. And Jamaal Williams goes to New Orleans, 12th in total, 19th in points per games. Williams and Sanders in particular, I feel like they could have bigger roles, but take a step back because so much of their production came from touchdown 17, obviously, for Jamaal. That's going to come down playing for New Orleans. And then 11 for Miles Sanders last year. But Erickson, we'll start with you on this one. How do you feel about these three guys and rank them moving forward?
So I have them ranked in the same way you kind of laid them out here. Okay. Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, and then Jamaal Williams. Sanders I'm the most excited about, I would say, because I think that he has a chance to see a 3-down workload. Like looking at who's behind him, Chuba Hubbard, Rasheem Blackshear, like those guys haven't shown anything to this current coaching staff. It's all brand new in Carolina, so there's no allegiance to, oh, well, Frank Reich has to feature these types of players here, and the only connection we have is Miles Sanders has ties to Josh McCown and to Deuce Staley. And Deuce Staley seems like he has a ton of influence on how running backs are used because he hated DeAndre Swift, and he was like never getting the most out of Swift. and that would annoy him, and that would make Jamaal Williams like, hey, Jamal's playing better, put him in the game. So if he's on Sanders' good side, we saw Sanders as a rookie, caught 50 passes. It seems crazy to think about that because we just totally look at him as like, oh yeah, never using the passing game. But it was kind of a mixture of everything bad for him in the Eagles, where he was a mobile quarterback. He wasn't good when he was getting targets. So it's kind of embedded in everyone's mind that, oh, he can't catch passes. When it's like, I mean, so much of running back pass game usage is usage itself. It's not really, oh, how talented are they? You know, it's about who the receivers are. Look, the Patriots and Austin Eckler doesn't get this many targets. Ramondre Stevenson doesn't get this many targets if there are actually legitimate bodies out there at receiver and tight end. It just doesn't work that way. And when you look at this Carolina receiving core, Adam Thielen, like he's the number one. Hayden Hurst, like hell
Did you
yeah,
like
throwing
the
the ball
tweet
to Miles Sanders.
Because the Panthers like adding all these weapons, and someone said you could sneak these weapons in an airport, right? Like, so Miles Sanders is going to be a huge part of this. Fitz, your thoughts on this grouping here? I think what Erickson just said, I think that is probably the right order, right? But I don't know. Alvin Kamara could be going away for a bit. I mean, it's that stuff is real ugly with him. So Jamaal could have a full-time role here because they got nobody else, Benjamin in New Orleans. So, he could boost up. I think he's, in terms of talent, he's definitely third in this, but we've seen him have production before, and he's a good NFL running back.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the Saints probably spend a day 3 pick somewhere on a running back, just needing to bulk that up. And, Jamaal Williams, yes, I would have been very unexcited about this signing had we been in for a full year of Alvin Kamara, because, again, just like last year with the Lions, we would have seen Jamaal Williams do next to nothing in the passing game because Kamara obviously handles that duty for the Saints. But I mean, if he does wind up getting like a 6-game suspension, all of a sudden that gives Williams some pretty immediate short-term value. And even though he's 27, that sort of short-term value means dynasty value. So if you're maybe in a team that's rebuilding or retooling, that might be an opportunity when we do, if we do see something handed down to Alvin Kamara by the league, for you to flip Jamaal Williams for maybe a 2024 draft pick of some sort. Certainly you're not going to get a first rounder for Jamaal Williams, but maybe something still second, third round. And Sanders, I agree with a lot of what Erickson said, and Sanders is still only 25, and I think this dude is really talented and was sort of underutilized as a pass catcher in Philadelphia, because I think we saw a little bit when he was at Penn State that he can catch passes. But Frank Reich, I mean, I can tell you personally as a Jonathan Taylor dynasty investor that I was apoplectic about some of the play calling with Frank Reich and his non-usage of Jonathan Taylor, like his first year and a half in the league. I mean, Taylor didn't start in year one. He was behind Marlon Mack. It took a season-ending injury.
I hated Nyheim Hines so much that year.
Nyheim Hines rotated in a lot. So, yes, as much as we were sort of wishing that Sanders could have been freed from that committee in Philadelphia and has a little bit clearer path to big-time touches in Carolina, I wouldn't automatically assume that's going to be the case with Frank Reich, whose running back usage can be confounding at times.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be some interesting scenarios. Before we talk about more running backs, I got to, tell you guys about Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It is not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is a platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? Test your general manager skills for free, FREE, in a mock. If you like what you see, use the promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. Let's talk about a couple more of these running back scenarios, guys, and just tell me how you think. I'm worried about splits in these new landing spots for some of these guys. Rashad Penny goes to Philly, right? Kenneth Gainwell finished off the season really well. And in the playoffs in particular, the guy averaged 13.3 touches per game in those 3 playoff games. His high during the regular season was 9. So maybe they're pairing Rashad Penny, who has this extensive injury history, with Gainwell because they like Gainwell. Boston Scott is still there. You go to Buffalo, Damian Harris slots in with James Cook. That one seems pretty obvious, but I'd like to hear your take. Singletary moves from Buffalo to Houston to pair with Dameon Pierce. Both these guys had over 200 touches last year. It's going to be interesting to see how they chop that up. I would assume Pierce is still the guy because I've just never been a Singletary guy. And then P. Ryan goes to Denver, which, P. Ryan was doing a fantastic job filling in for Joe Mixon last season. And Javonte, a couple months ago, they said he may not be ready for the beginning of the season. And then recently they're saying, he should be fine for the beginning of the season. So I'm going to call that 50-50. Who knows by the time we get there. So these scenarios, Erickson, when you look at, the Philly one with Penny, Damian Harris going to Buffalo, Singletary to Houston, and P. Ryan to Denver. What stands out to you in these situations? You know what? We can throw Deontay Foreman going to Chicago in there too, because Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman, that's an interesting combo as well. So let's put that one in there too, Erickson. Your thoughts on those scenarios there?
I refuse to talk about the Deontay Foreman Herbert combination because I absolutely hate it. And as someone that's just huge on Khalil Herbert, I can't turn a blind eye and think that Foreman's not going to be involved. Because
when they draft Bijan at 9, and
I think that's the other thing too. It's
we see RPOs with Fields and Bijan. Oh, let's see that. Let's do that one.
Yeah, it's possible it doesn't even matter at all because they could always just draft another running back too. Because the Bears have a lot of draft capital to work with. They may not be done adding to the position. So I think that's a tough. I like Herbert the most. I think he's better, but it's really not about who's the better running back. It's a matter of how much better is he? It's kind of that old saying where you don't need to be so much faster than the bear. You need to be faster than the slowest person running away from the bear. And I think that kind of dovetails nicely into talking about Singletary versus Dameon Pierce, where people are like, oh, Devin Singletary, he sucks. He's not that good. But it's like, okay, but is he better than Dare Ogunbowale, Rex Burkhead, those type of jabronis that Dameon Pierce was competing with?
Way better than all those guys.
Yes, he is better than those guys. And you can't just, you have to admit that. He is better than those players. So if there is going to be more of a touch squeeze in Houston, Singletary would probably put that on a guy like Dameon Pierce. So, Pierce also didn't see a ton of receiving usage last year. Wasn't really involved as a pass catcher. Singletary's not great in that department either. So that does give him a path. So for me, it didn't really move the needle for me on Pierce. I think I was probably lower on Pierce because I felt like he was more likely to take on more competition in that backfield than someone like a Tyler Algier, who at this time still has the backfield mostly to himself because he has the most high profile backfield teammate in Cordero Patterson. Yeah. So if I'm the Falcons, why am I going out and adding another running back when we literally have 2 great running backs already on our team? It doesn't make any sense. Whereas the Bears were always candidate to add another running back because they only had Khalil Herbert. And the same thing with the Texans because they didn't have literally anybody. So we're never going to see backfields where teams just don't add anyone. You have to fill out a roster. You have to have backups somewhere, and teams usually want to try to get better backups in case
sometimes you're hoping
hurt.
They add Ogunbowale and Rex Burkhead, so it doesn't affect the guy that you want to get the touches, but not so lucky with Pierce this year.
Yeah. So I think for Pierce, I think he's still going to be an RB2, and I mean, he's obviously very efficient with the ball because of his playing style. It's not because of the offense that he's going to average a probably decent yards per carry because he breaks tackles. That's part of his game. And he's definitely more of an explosive rusher than Singletary. But at the same time, when you embrace contact, you're more likely to get hurt. It's just a fact. Yeah. There's a difference between breaking tackles because you run guys over and breaking tackles because you're elusive. You'd much rather be the elusive running back that doesn't take as many hits versus Dameon Pierce. We saw him break down last year. The dude did not finish the year because he never taken more than 150 carries in a college season. So I think the team kind of looked at him and was like, hey, we probably should make sure we don't give Pierce all that work again because he couldn't finish the season. So I think Singletary will be more involved. But for me, I think it just keeps Pierce in the RB2 range.
Fitz, when you look at these scenarios, anything you like or dislike? I mean, Rashad Penny even going to Philly too. That's a PFF darling, but he can't stay on the field. Like that scenario is weird to me. Between who do I want between Penny and Gainwell? I think Penny is clearly the better back, but I can't trust him to play more than 5 games because he just doesn't. So that scenario is difficult as well.
As someone who really likes Dameon Pierce and is higher on him in dynasty rankings than consensus and then, higher than Erickson and some of my other Fantasy Pros colleagues, like I'm kind of happy about the Singletary signing because I think he's kind of a meat shield. Like I think it could have been worse. They could have signed someone more interesting than him. And I thought Pierce was pretty terrific as a rookie. Although granted, they did have to really pull back the reins on him late in the season. After, and I love that Erickson taking the veiled shot at Dan Mullen again for how little he used Dameon Pierce at the University of Florida. So, but I like this. I mean, I don't think Singletary is going to pose any sort of existential threat to Dameon Pierce's workload, and it could have been worse. Although, for all of these, I think we should issue the caveat that there are 15 to 20 interesting running backs coming out in this rookie class. So these backfields are going to be further complicated by what we see in the NFL draft. And we're going to have a lot of 2-man situations turn into 3-man situations before long.
And we still have good free agents, guys. I mean, Kareem Hunt, Zeke, Leonard Fournette, Jerick McKinnon still haven't landed in spots. So there's, a handful of free agents plus 15 backs coming in through the draft somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah. I mean, these situations will look different moving forward. Let's talk about go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think Damian Harris is almost probably, as far as his role, is going to be maybe a 1-for-1 replacement for Singletary or close to it, which is good.
200 carries. Yeah.
Yeah. We saw James Cook's role grow as the season went on last year. So I think he is going to continue to maintain like passing down plus role for the Bills, which we like if we're James Cook investors. And you said it, Bugs. Penny gets hurt a lot, could be really interesting. I mean, I've got him in a couple of dynasty leagues, and I considered him a distressed asset coming into the offseason. This was one of the few landing spots that, maybe
feels good.
Yeah, that feels good. And
so you're putting him on the block then, right?
I could. I mean, at least
this is your chance to get out while he's not hurt.
Exactly. And I might draw interest, whereas before it would have been crickets if I would have put him on the block. And let's face it, we know Philly is going to draft someone else because Kenneth Gainwell's, playing weight is probably under 200 pounds. They can't trust him. We know there's going to be a Penny injury at some point. They're going to draft someone else. And that could be Bijan. And then all of a sudden my enthusiasm about Rashad Penny goes up in a puff of white smoke. But
or Gibbs or Charbonnet, I mean, there are plenty of backs that they could take where you go, all right, well, Penny's clearly the emergency option.
Yeah.
So
Bugs, you mentioned the free agents, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, Jerick McKinnon. Do either of you guys have any enthusiasm still for Kareem Hunt, or did the window of enthusiasm, it was like we were biding our time waiting for him to get out from behind Nick Chubb. Now that he finally is, it's coming off a year where his yardage after contact was down a little bit. Yards per carry were down last year. I don't know. Are you guys still excited about Kareem Hunt landing somewhere else?
It really depends. Like the Chargers trade Eckler and bring in Hunt. Okay. There's a scenario where you could see being interested in him, but it'd have to be somewhere where the running backs are fairly miserable, and that's where he gets his shot.
I guess for me with Hunt is his lack of interest because he's not good anymore, or is it because he has off-field baggage that doesn't necessarily lead? Like, if you're a franchise and you bring him in, it seems like it was long ago, but it's still part of your profile as a player. And remember, and part of the reason he was brought into the Browns is because of Dorsey, like someone that had already recruited him with the Chiefs. So there was already a familiar person there that was like, no, like we trust Hunt. Like he can still be professional in our offense, in our organization. There may not be anyone that feels comfortable like that. Where like, oh yeah, we can bring in Kareem Hunt. It's like, no, like we don't want to bring Kareem Hunt. Now he'll end up on a team eventually at some point, and that scares me because I don't think that he's like washed. I still think he is really talented as a running back, and just the way that he was used last year was just so bizarre. And, basically after week 1, they just like reduced his touches like entirely.
It's
And
Stefanski is just in love with Chubb. Yeah.
I mean, not the worst thing in the world. Like,
sure.
I mean, he's not wrong by doing that. But so then why didn't they just trade Hunt at the end of last year? Was nobody interested in Hunt? And is that just kind of a carryover effect? We're not seeing any interest again with him. But I mean, him compared to Zeke to Fournette, like I would, if I want the best player, I would want Hunt. And maybe it's an off-season injury where then Kareem Hunt cashes in and takes over a backfield potential, because I think that he would torpedo any other team that he would go to, because I think he still has the talent.
Jacksonville, put him next to Etienne. Have him be the big back there. They kind of do the same stuff, but I think he could work there.
Johnson's going to be pissed off again. Behind Kareem Hunt again.
I mean, I'm not letting Dearness Johnson keep me from signing a running back. I'll say that. And I do like Dearness. Let's move to the wide receivers here. I just want to know, there's a ton of interesting situations here. Who raised value by moving? Because we know DJ Moore got traded from Carolina to Chicago. I don't know, kind of lateral. They run a ton. He's going to be the number one, but they have other targets now. They have Claypool, they have Mooney, they have Komet. So interesting, but I don't know if it raises him a lot. Alan Lazard goes to the Jets. Well, they have Garrett Wilson, so I don't think that moves him. Juju going to New England, I mean, he becomes a clear number one, where Kelsey was a number one in Kansas City, in New England. But he's kind of just a plug and replace for Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers goes from New England to Vegas, where I'm wondering where they're going to put him. Obviously, I'm assuming on the outside, but he's played 64.6% of his career snaps in the slot. Renfro, 69.7%, but Myers has way, way higher contested catch rate than Renfro. So I'm assuming that Myers goes to the outside, but a weird fit for him. Thielen goes to Carolina to deal with a rookie quarterback. Cooks goes to Dallas, but obviously CeeDee Lamb is the number one there. So I'm wondering, did any of these bigger names that have moved here, Fitz, have they raised their value?
No. I mean, that's almost a flat no. Brandon Cooks, I mean, I guess I kind of like that he's out of Houston, and things just seemed a little bit shaky with their offense there, although I guess they're going to have a new and, possibly it's Bryce Young at quarterback, and that might have rekindled Cook's value there. But I like the situation for him in Dallas. And I kind of like that he's playing with Lamb, a guy who's going to take a little, more than coverage. A little bit of the, yeah. I mean, we're going to see Cooks facing a lot of secondary cornerbacks with his matchups. And I mean, Adam Thielen is a guy who's, I was so uninterested in him, and I'm still not exactly excited about Adam Thielen, but this was actually a pretty good spot for him to go. And granted, this is a guy who's dropped in yards per catch, yards per target, yards per route run for like 3 straight seasons. And my God, last year's yards per route run was like 1. It was like 1 yard per route. So certainly not excited about him, but he's in a spot where he's going to get targets. And so, I mean, I think he might be able to maintain like wide receiver 4, maybe low end wide receiver 3 value there for a guy who, I think his prime is well past him, but that was not a bad place for him to go.
Erickson, when you look at this group of wide receivers that have been on the move here, is there one that jumps out, or is it all kind of lateral, maybe a little bump up or a little bump down for some of these guys, but for the most part, lateral moves, right?
I think so, except for one guy that you didn't mention. I'm going off the show sheet because now we get to talk deep players, because this is a Dynasty podcast after all. Deontay Hardy going towards the Buffalo Bills. I think that's a massive move, honestly.
Well, as a Khalil Shakir truther, I'm slightly offended by the notion that Hardy is going to threaten Shakir's ascendance to his rightful place as the Bills' number 2 receiver.
Well, the thing is, the Bills' number 2 receiver is up for grabs. Like, that's the thing that's like a debate here, because
you think Deontay Hardy's going to keep the Bills from drafting Jordan Addison if he falls or somebody like that, though? Like, that's my thing. Like, Hardy is, I know a lot of people love this Hardy move because it could be sneaky.
Well, I mean, they paid him, 2 years, $9.5 million. Like, that's more than they paid Isaiah McKenzie last year, who they just already cut.
And they let him walk, yeah.
So I think that when you're looking at Hardy, I mean, what was the biggest problem last year with a lot of their receivers? They weren't getting open besides Stephon Diggs. Like Gabe Davis wasn't getting open. DeAndre Hardy got open when he played healthy in 2021. Like he's an electric playmaker with the ball in his hands. He gets open. 99th percentile in terms of receiving grade versus single coverage in 2021. Look, what we see from some of these small school prospects a lot of the time is when they don't make difference-making plays as receivers, where do they make it is on special teams.
Yeah.
He's already made a Pro Bowl as a special teams kick returner and punt returner. So they know that he's dangerous with the ball in his hands. And the Bills really just haven't had that type of guy where it's like, oh, this guy can like immediately take the ball to the house on one play. And it doesn't necessarily be because Josh Allen is chucking the ball downfield to him. It's, hey, let's get this guy a bubble screen and make guys miss. Like they haven't really had that type of player. Now, James Cook can maybe add a layer of that in. But, I mean, look, Hardy is free in Dynasty. Like I literally submitted a waiver today to pick him up off the waiver wire, and I'm dropping Isaiah McKenzie because I'm like, I don't need this guy. So I think he's worth stashing. Like you said, obviously they bring in Addison, they draft a receiver, then okay, yeah, it's poof. But I mean, last spot on your roster for a guy who has a legitimate contract, I think it's worth it, especially with, I mean, there are other receivers that could have signed in free agency. DJ Chark is still on the market, and they didn't sign him. So,
and there are other guys that moved too that I think these guys have moved themselves up a little bit. Lower names, lower on the totem pole, of course. But Elijah Moore going to Cleveland, just get him out of New York with that weird situation. He obviously didn't like the coaching staff. That's a big one. Mac Hollins going to Atlanta. I don't know, from Vegas, maybe lateral. They run the ball too much. Parris Campbell going to the Giants. They already have Wandale there. That's kind of a weird move. Robert Woods going to Houston. Could be a number one at this point. And Isaiah McKenzie goes to Indianapolis to replace Parris Campbell. Fitz, do you like any of those moves just in a bottle?
Elijah Moore, just to get him out of the Jets organization was good. I mean, I would have preferred that he be involved in that trade to the Packers when they eventually do swing something for Aaron Rodgers, but he's intriguing. I guess Parris Campbell, I mean, he's still 25, so he's mildly interesting if he can stay healthy. At least we saw last year that Parris Campbell is at least worth waiting for and, you know, cursing ourselves if he gets hurt again. But like, I think people were starting to lose interest in Parris Campbell before last year. So he proved himself to us. By the way, can we backtrack for a second? I need to ask Erickson, since he is a Patriots fan, about the Juju signing. Like, what's your take on that and what it does for Juju's value? I mean,
excited
Juju,
about all those TikToks.
But now it feels like Juju's like 34 at this point, but he's still only 26.
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty lateral move in my opinion. I think that Myers is better actually as like a separator. And I think is actually better like on the outside. And the reason that he played in the slot so much for the Patriots because they didn't have anybody else to like who else are they trying to feature on offense? So it's
not Nelson Aguilar. Oh, right, come on. So it's
like, he was always best put in the slot because it was just easier to get him the ball there versus other players. But Jacoby never really took advantage of that because he never, besides obviously seeing a lot of targets, but he's not dynamic after the catch. So Juju offers that a little bit more, but he also needs more
room
scheme to get him open because he's not as good as separating as Jacoby Myers is. Like that's why I think Juju will actually play more in the slot with New England than he did last year. I mean, last year he actually played at a career low in slot rate with the Chiefs as they kind of like mix and match a lot of their guys. So I like him in the slot more. But I do think that the Patriots aren't done adding receivers. Like they've been connected to Hopkins, to Judy, Cortland Sutton, whatever. So I think that they're going to add another receiver here. And that just makes Juju just someone you're like, you know, take it or leave it. Like if he's on your roster right now, I mean, he's still young. So it's like, okay, but I mean, the difference making that he was when he's so much younger in his career, I think that's kind of long gone at this point.
And your thoughts about Moore, Hollins? I didn't even mention Mecole Hardman going to the Jets, but any of those moves, pique your interest?
I mean, Elijah Moore for me. Like, I think that he's a screaming buy right now. I don't know how high the market's going to view him just after how horrible his second year was, but we're talking about a player that was the second highest scoring player at his position for a 6-week stretch as a rookie with Mike White, Zach Wilson, and Josh Johnson on his 30th team in the NFL. So I am all about buying it. And the fact that we saw Deshaun Watson fuel guys like a Will Fuller, like, dude, I mean, Elijah Moore has a lot of what Will Fuller can do in the slot as a burner. I mean, a 4.35. Like, the guy can absolutely fly. And they don't necessarily have that already. You know, that's not Cooper. Peoples-Jones is okay, but I mean, we could
Field
see a
stretcher.
massive year for Elijah Moore.
I'm excited about him too. Just get him out of that Jet scenario. Get him somewhere where he's going to be on the field and getting targets. Tight ends to end it out here, gentlemen. Darren Waller getting moved to the Giants. We're kind of waiting for that big wide receiver move for the Giants after re-upping Danny Dollars and Saquon now. But they go out and they get Darren Waller. I thought it was a good deal for them. Schultz goes to Houston. Hurst goes to Carolina. Gesicki goes to New England. Other moves. OJ Howard went to Vegas. Jonnu Smith, Austin Hooper also went to Vegas. Jonnu Smith to Atlanta. Akins to Cleveland. Interesting moves, but not fantasy impactful too much. Erickson, your thoughts on these big tight end moves? Waller, Schultz, and Hurst.
Well, I think Waller has a chance to be like the number one target on his team, which is just rare for tight ends. Like there's not a lot of tight ends that kind of fit that criteria. It's funny. I tweeted out earlier today after the Giants signed Jamison Crowder. They are monopolizing the wide receiver 3 market with Crowder, Campbell, Shepard, Slayton. Like they're just getting all the wide receiver 3s they can muster. And it's because I think they believe that Waller is their, pseudo number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
So if he is healthy, it's hard to see them not having a significant target share over some of these other players who we've just kind of seen are really more ancillary pieces in a Giants passing game that, come on, we can't expect Daniel. I mean, this offense isn't going to be just very prolific. It can be efficient, but it's not going to be Daniel Jones slinging the ball 45 attempts per game. Like that's not how they're going to win football games. So I think that you'll see spike weeks from several of those different Giants receivers every once in a while, but Waller is really the only consistent guy that I can really see because he's only the one that's really proven to be, hey, I can be the number one pass catcher in an offense. So I think Waller, it was an upgrade for him to get away from Devontae Adams so he can be the number one target for Big Blue. As for everyone else, I actually hate the Dalton Schultz landing spot. Like I actually legit hate it so much. This is like classic, like Austin Hooper monster season with a super pass heavy offense, goes to Cleveland. They're run heavy, super conservative. He has nothing after the catch, and where's Austin Hooper? Like Austin Hooper just falls off the fantasy map like altogether. So I'm trading Dalton Schultz for literally anything right now. Like get him off my roster. Give me a back end second round rookie pick so I can draft one of these rookie tight ends.
Fitz, your thoughts on the tight end movement here?
Yeah, agree with Erickson on Schultz. Plus, he's just a guy anyway who was in a magical spot in Dallas. And watch my guy from Wisconsin, Jake Ferguson, be this sleeper tight end next year. Just watch for it.
Fitz is the OG Schultz hater. He has not liked Schultz since we started this show.
But it's kind of interesting that all these teams with thin wide receiver groups went out and signed some of the top tight ends in the market, because I think they knew they weren't going to be able to adequately play catch up at wide receiver this year because the free agent crop at wide receiver is hot garbage juice. And that's
why the Bears traded that pick for Claypool, is because they looked at this group and said, we don't like it.
That was still a terrible trade, but
I agree with you.
They made up for it by getting DJ Moore, I guess, in the trade for the number one pick. But they just knew they weren't going to be able to make up for the add to the talent, adequately stock their wide receiver rooms when the free agent class was bad and the rookie class is not as deep as we're used to seeing. So Waller, I guess he could lead this team in targets, but man, I'm just like, I still see him in the top 8 in dynasty rankings at tight end. And I'm just not there with a 30-year-old dude who's missed 14 games the last 2 seasons. And really hasn't been like this difference-making guy now for 3 years. So I'm a little concerned that that's maybe not going to work out, and that trading for him now is like catching a falling knife. So what about Hayden Hurst going to the Panthers? The guy's had one fantasy relevant season. 2020 when he was
with us, just like Austin Hooper.
Exactly. The tight end 9 with the Falcons in 2020 with 571 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then Gesicki, I'm actually sort of encouraged by the Gesicki signing. He's reunited with his college coach, Bill O'Brien from Penn State. And strangely enough, Erickson might remember this, but Bill O'Brien's 1 year as the Patriots offensive coordinator. Now, I'm not expecting Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki to duplicate what Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez did that year. But those guys combined for like 2,300 yards and 24 touchdowns.
Yeah, Brady
different level
for
of
like
talent.
5,000 yards that season.
Yeah, we were also getting, I don't think we're going to see Mac Jones suddenly turn into, Tom Brady at the height of his power. So, true, but like I do think this sort of rekindles interest in Mike Gesicki after the Dolphins made the weird move of franchising him. And then after Gesicki had averaged 44 snaps a game over a 3-year period up until last year, played like 28 snaps a game last year. So
yeah, it was very confusing what they were doing with him. It was like, here we're keeping Mike Gesicki. He's our guy, but here's way more snaps for Durham Smythe. So, run up the middle, run behind Durham. Yeah, at least he'll be a pass catcher in New England. Well, that will wrap it up for today. Obviously, more moves will happen, and we will be covering them as they do happen. But at Andrew Erickson _Erickson, what's going on with you, and what do you got coming up?
Just draft content, dynasty content, rookies, mock drafts, big boards. You guys know the draft's coming up soon, by the way?
Is that right? Oh, I had no idea. So, I don't spend every waking moment thinking about it. Erickson, Fitzy at Fitz _FF. What do you got coming up, man?
Same type of thing. A lot of draft focus in the next couple of weeks, and also getting into the best ball streets here, and I'm going to be doing some articles on like my must-have guys, and pretty much my must-have guys for best ball are going to be my must-have guys for redraft too. So people might want to check those out, and they can find me. You might have said it already, Bog. Sorry, at Fitz _FF.
Absolutely. And at Bogman Sports for me, you can catch me here. You catch me doing the NFL Draft War Room with my guy CK. We're in this league. A lot of fantasy baseball content in this league as well. So please check those all out. And we will see you guys next week. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.